Hey guys, so today we're here with the Barricade HD Tire Carrier with the spare tire mount, fitting all 2018 and newer JL Wranglers. So whenever you're upgrading to larger wheels and tires, it's always a great idea to keep your spare tire carrier in mind when you're doing so. And the reason for that is the factory spare tire carrier can only handle so much weight, and so can the factory hinges. Now, a great solution to keeping your factory hinges as well as your spare tire carrier in check is upgrading to a heavy-duty tire carrier like this one from Barricade. Now, the reason why I do like this a lot is the fact that it not only adds a mount to the back, but it's also going to be reinforcing those tailgate hinges on the side. Now, if you do add a larger spare without reinforcing those tailgate hinges, it can cause the tailgate to sag over time. But with this design, you're not getting any of that. You're getting a very strong design, which is going to reduce any of that sag, reduce any damage to the tailgate, and have a very strong system to keep that spare tire in place, and also keep it in place while you're bouncing around on the trail. Now, like I said, this is going to be a very strong system made of a carbon-plated steel, so it is going to have some weight to it, but you can ensure that it's going to have a lot of integrity in the design. And this is also going to have a nice texture black powder coat finish on top, which is going to provide an off-road and heavy-duty look to the back of your Jeep. But what it is also going to do is protect that steel underneath from any rust or corrosion. Now, the other thing that I do really like about this option is the fact that it's able to accept the factory third brake light as well as the backup camera. It comes with everything that you need in the package to get it installed, and it's going to be a very complete kit down to the lug nuts that it includes in the kit as well. So as far as pricing is concerned, this is going to be roughly $400. And in my personal opinion, I think that that's a pretty good price for what you're getting out of the kit. Now, in comparison to some other choices, again, this is going to be a complete kit. Some other options on the page may only come up with the spare tire mount for the factory tailgate, or they may just come up with reinforcements for the hinges. Now, there are going to be those more expensive solutions that will include the rear bumper and the tire carrier together, but if you're not necessarily looking to mount up a rear bumper with the tire carrier, or if you're looking for just a tub-mounted tire carrier that is going to hold up for a very long time and support an oversized tire, then this is going to be a great choice. Now, install is going to be a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. We are going to be removing the tailgate for this install, so you will need a little bit of mechanical know-how in order to do that. However, you're going to need some very basic hand tools to get the job done in probably 2 to 3 hours worth of your time. So speaking of the install, let me run you through that right now. The tools that I used for this install were a dead blow, a ball peen hammer, 2 trim removal tools, a 17mm open-ended wrench, 10mm open-ended wrench, a center punch, a flathead screwdriver and a Phillips head screwdriver, a drill, a 21, 19, 18, 16, 13, and 10mm socket, a T55, 40, 25, and 9 Torx, and an impact wrench. So our first step to swapping out our spare tire carrier is obviously to take off our spare tire. So first we need to take our T40 Torx from the JL toolkit or any T40 Torx and just unlock the cover for our backup camera and pull back so we can access our lug nuts. Then we can take a 22mm socket if you have the factory lug nuts, or if you have different lug nuts, you'll need your key or whatever socket that is available for that. I'm using our key in a 21mm socket as well as our impact wrench. You can just take off those 3 lug nuts there. So once those are off, we can take off our spare tire. So our next step is to disconnect the wiring harness for our third brake light and our backup camera, but we have to remove the interior panel in order to get to that wiring harness. So I am going to be using a trim removal tool. I'm going to start down at the bottom here and just kind of pull this trim piece forward. It's only held in by some clips, so you can give it a good pull back. Right? Now once that's off, that will expose the wiring harness. We're going to disconnect the 2 up at the top. I want to make sure that those red locking tabs are up. We can press down on that tab and pull back. Might be a little bit easier to take the clip out so you can get a better grip on it. What we can do next is just pull this grommet out and release those wiring harnesses. And then we can remove the bolts out of our carrier. I'm going to be using a 13mm socket to do so. There's 8 bolts that are surrounding the outside of the carrier that are holding it on. Just make sure that you have a grip on the carrier for this last bolt because it's going to come off. So while we're here, we can also take off our back vents. I just have a trim removal tool. There's 2 tabs up at the top that are holding it in. I just like to press down on them and pull back. So before we hop into the rest of the install and start breaking down our factory tire carrier, I do want to stop down and tell you guys a little bit more about this Barricade HD Tire Carrier setup in comparison to the factory one, show you guys some of the differences, some of the similarities, and how this is going to be a big upgrade. So starting off, again, this is going to be an incredible upgrade for your spare tire carrier as well as your tailgate. So just as a brief overview of our factory setup, we have the factory hinges on the factory tailgate, and then we also have our factory carrier. Now that's great for stock applications, anything under a 33-inch tire, it's going to be able to hold it just fine. However, once you add a larger spare, all of that extra weight and all of that extra load on the carrier itself, as well as on the hinges, starts to wear out a little bit quicker. It can end up having the tailgate sag over time, which will cause some issues for opening and closing the tailgate as far as the striker and it aligning. And it's also going to kind of wear out the studs on your spare tire carrier because it's not intended for an oversized tire. Now this is really just made of a plastic construction. It is going to be a heavy duty plastic construction considering it's carrying a spare tire, but again, it's really only good for the stock application and up to really a 33-inch tire. Now moving over to this HD option by Barricade, this again is going to be a big upgrade for a number of different reasons. First off, this is going to reinforce your tailgate to ensure that an oversized tire carrier or an oversized tire with a lot of that extra weight is not going to cause the tailgate to sag. You have this X in the middle here that's going to have a lot of strength and integrity to it. You're getting heavy duty hinges and heavy duty pins, again, to ensure that this is going to hold up a lot better than the factory tailgate hinges. Now this is also going to come with the tire carrier portion included in the hinges. Everything is one here, and you'll be able to mount up an oversized tire with adjustability. So those mounts there will be able to go in and out as well as up and down, so you can customize it to where your tire or where you want your tire to sit. Now this is also going to be able to reuse your factory third brake light. We do get a mount for that, and you're also going to get a mount for your factory backup camera if your JL is equipped. Now what I really like about this is the fact, again, it's strong. It's made of a hot rolled 5mm carbon plate material, so it's heavy. It's got a lot of strength to it, and it's really just going to be a big upgrade as far as the strength and integrity is concerned when it comes to your tailgate and an oversized tire. And not to mention, to top it off, it does have that black texture powder coat finish. It's really to protect that steel underneath, but it's also going to add a very heavy duty and aggressive off-road feel and off-road look to the back of your JL, and really match with any other heavy duty accessories or heavy duty rear bumpers that you pair with it. So enough from me and enough about these two on the table. Let's go ahead and start to disassemble our carrier from the factory so we can swap all of our components onto our new carrier. So in order to break down our tire carrier, we have to remove all of the T25 screws and bolts that are holding it together. So I'm going to start up here with the ones on the stud. I'm going to take a T25 torque socket and just remove the 2 bolts up here. Now that's going to cause our studs to drop down. If you're doing this for the first time, they may be stuck. I do have a dead blow here. All you have to do is crack these with the dead blow and it'll fall right out. So once it's out, we can kind of move this to the side, take that second bolt out and put that to the side as well. Then we can start to remove the bolts that are holding in the top portion of our carrier. We're gonna have a couple on either side, same T25 Torx. And that's gonna separate that there. So you're gonna have this wiring harness here. It's just kind of gonna be stuck in there. Just gonna peel that out. We can put this part to the side. And what our goal here is to get this third brake light out. So then we can take our T25 Torx again and remove the couple bolts that are holding this front piece on, so we can access the bolts underneath that are holding in the third brake light. Start to peel up on this, and peel it apart. Take this front plate off, and that will expose the wiring harness as well as the bolts there. What we can do is take that T25 Torx again and remove the two bolts that are holding it in the third brake light. Once that's pushed off, we can disconnect the wiring harness by pushing down and pulling back. We can get this out of here. So we can put this to the side. So now we can remove these 3 screws that are holding on the backup camera. I'm gonna use a T9 Torx socket. These are incredibly small. We also have to salvage this wiring harness, so I am taking a trim removal tool and just taking this clip off. And we also need to disconnect this wire here, so we're going to press down on that tab and pull back. Put our camera to the side and then remove this harness. What we need to keep is the harness, the camera, and the third brake light. Now that we have the carrier off and broken down, what we need to do is remove our tailgate so we can install our carrier and our tailgate hinges on the tailgate off of the car. So what we're gonna do is pull up on this and pull back so we can expose this trim piece here. We do have to remove some trim and get that out of the way in order to access the back of our tailgate hinges. I'm just going to pull this piece up. There's a little tab that you can press to open it up. Just gonna push that back there. Then we'll be able to remove this trim over here. So what I'm gonna do is pop each of these tie down points up. You can take a T40 Torx and remove them. I'm using the T40 Torx out of the JL toolkit once again. Do the same here. And then same for the one in the back. This one's gonna come up backwards. Right. I'm going to remove this panel so we can move this trim piece out of the way. So what we can do now is start to remove this piece on the side. We just have to pull it out and pull it forward so we can access those bolts. So it's gonna be kind of a pry game. So I'm just gonna remove this trim piece and I'm gonna start to pry with my trim tool. So as you can see, it's just held in by clips, and you just have to maneuver it out of the way. Might be helpful to unplug your sub if you have it. If you don't necessarily need to worry about that. But I am going to take the sub and the trim, just move that back out of the way, and you'll be able to see these little covers here. We can pull those off, and that's where we can access those bolts there. But first, we need to remove our stopper as well as the harness from our tailgate so we can remove it all as one. So that third harness, we are going to have to disconnect it and remove it. I'm just going to take the trim removal tool that we've used before, pry up, press down on that and pull back. Then we can continue down the line. Put that inside and get that out of the way. Just gonna remove this one on the inside of the body too, so we can kind of move that out of the way of our hinges there. Give us some room to work with without a harness in our way. Put that back. Then we can take that same T40 Torx and remove the stopper. Now with somebody supporting the tailgate, what we can do at this point is remove the 3 bolts on either hinge. I'm going to be using a 13mm socket in order to do that. So now that we have our tailgate off, I do have it on the table. I'd recommend to have a moving blanket or something soft under the surface just to make sure that you're not damaging the paint or the tailgate itself. And then we can go ahead and remove our hinges. So I'm going to be using a T55 Torx socket. You could also use a Torx bit for this. So in the kit you are provided with spacers. Obviously there is an indent here with our new tailgate or our new tire carrier hinges. This is going to be completely flush with this piece, so I'm going to add the 2 spacers that were provided. If you find that you only need 1, you can use 1 as well. I'm just going to add these 2 just so everything is flush. Same thing for the upper tailgate hinge. Once those are evenly lined up, we can grab our carrier and carefully place it down. Now this is going to be pretty heavy, so just be mindful of that. What I like to do is take a punch and kind of line everything up. Next, we can take our factory hardware and thread that in to the factory mounting location of our spare tire carrier. want to get everything threaded in and adjusted before we go ahead and tighten everything down. As you can see, there is a little bit of adjustability here, so we may be able to move it up, but I want to get everything threaded in before we go ahead and do that. So we can take our bolts for the hinge, thread those into the welded plate on the back. It's inside our tailgate. And what we can do at this point is kind of center it, make sure that everything is even. Then we can take a 16mm socket and tighten up our hinge bolts. Again, making sure that everything is sitting properly. Then we can tighten up our carrier bolts with that 13mm socket that we used before. So now that we have our carrier on our tailgate, what we can do is start to mount up our mount for our spare tire. Now, as you can see, there is adjustability for this. I'm just going to put this in the middle spot, and then we can measure after once the tailgate is on. If we have to adjust it, we'll go ahead and adjust it. If not, we can keep it where it is. I'm going to use the provided hardware, thread that into the carrier. Once that's hand threaded in, what we can do is tighten it up with an 18mm socket. Once that's on, we can grab the part of the mount that has the studs and slide that over the top there. So once you have the mount lined up on the lower mount, what we can do is take our provided hardware. It's going to be the bolt, 2 flat washers, and a nylon lock nut. And we can put 1 through the top and 2 through the sides. What we can do now is tighten those up. I'm going to be using a 17mm wrench for the nut side and a 16mm socket for the bolt head side. What we can do next is attach our third brake light. So what I'm going to do is grab our 2 factory screws that we're holding it in to begin with, and mount that with those screws to the mount. Going to be using that T25 Torx. Thread them in, we'll tighten them up in a sec. Now we can mount this to our carrier. We're going to be using the provided bolts. It's going to be the smaller bolts, 2 flat washers, and a nylon lock nut. Then we can tighten those up with a 10mm socket and a 10mm wrench. Now we can install our pin, making sure that the pin part is facing down. So you want to make sure that you have those metal sleeves inside the tailgate. That's going to let it move in and out. Then we can take our pin, making sure that little slot at the bottom is facing down. Take a hammer and carefully hit that through. So once the pin is through, you should be able to move it back and forth because of those metal bearings in there, or these sleeves. And then we can attach this little clip at the bottom. This is just a little metal retainer clip. I'm just gonna put a punch on top and clip it in just like that. And then we can repeat that process for the other one. Now, starting with the bottom hinge, we're gonna take our metal sleeves. We're gonna insert that in either part of the hinge here. Then we can take our provided mounting hinge, our pin, and put that through. So you're gonna need a metal hammer, and we can tap the pin into place. So once it's all the way through, you should have movement because of that metal sleeve there, but we can take a metal clip, put that retainer clip down on top of there, take a punch, and just tap that into place as well. All right, so now that the bottom one's done, we can repeat that for the top one. All right, now we can mount this up to our Jeep. So at this point, we're ready to mount our tailgate back up. You're just gonna need your factory hardware. Then once it's in place, you can go ahead and tighten it down. So at this point, what I recommend is to close up your tailgate very carefully, just to make sure that the striker is lining up. Now we got it to a point where it is lining up just fine, but if you are looking to do that, you will need to reconnect this stopper here, and I'll show you guys in just a second. But we're gonna take that bolt that we took out from the factory and just thread that back in and tighten it up with that T40 Torx. So now that that's on there, we can test again to see if everything lines up. All right, so it's hitting the striker and it's closing correctly. So now we can start to piece everything else back together. I'm gonna start with this wiring harness here. You just pop this back into place since we've already reattached our tailgate check. While we're here, we can plug back in our wiring harness. All right. What we can do now is put our trim back into place. I'm gonna start by plugging back in our sub wiring harness. Again, if you don't have this, you can skip this step. But after that's plugged in, you wanna make sure that the seat belt is out of the way. Then we can start to line everything up. What we can do now is place our trim back into place so we can take our tie downs and reattach them. You're gonna be tightening it up with a T40 Torx. Next, we can put this bottom trim piece back into place. Clip it in. Same with our trim piece on the side here. You can slide this piece back into place. Now, at this point, what we can do is close up our tailgate. We can finish up our carrier, and then we can put our trim piece back on. So what we can do next is mount up our factory backup camera. We're gonna place that down right on in to the new mount that's provided. Then we can take our new hardware. It's going to be the very tiny bolts as well as the nuts. And then we can pop that through. Take the nut and take a Phillips head screwdriver, tighten that up. So now we can take our factory wiring harness, taking the plug for our third brake light, and we can just pop that into place. Once that's clicked in, we can take the wiring harness for our backup camera, put that through. We can take our wiring harness, put that through, and plug that into the back of our camera. So once the camera is plugged in, we can put the cover over, slide that onto our studs, and then that will hold there once the tire is on, and then once the lug nuts are on, that will stay there. Then we can take our wiring harness, pop that back into the factory location, work that through. Plug that grommet back in. Then we can plug it back in our wiring harness. Stick that into place. Set that red locking tab. Then all we have to do at this point is pop our trim piece back into place. Close up our tailgate and attach our spare tire. So at this point, all we have to do is mount up our spare tire. Now you are provided with new lug nuts in the kit, so we're going to thread these on. And then we can tighten it up with a 19mm socket. So that's going to wrap it up for my review and install. Make sure you like and subscribe, and for more videos and products just like this, always keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.